We have apparently murdered this lady. Just curious, are we not allowed to tell our side of this?
This story unfolds with calculated cruelty, ritualistic obsession by a sex-craved cult leader, and survival of a disturbing kind. A haunting photo made rounds on Snapchat. Captioned, "Ready for my date." It captured a young woman in a white shirt and prescription glasses, her hair styled for an evening out. That woman was Sydney Loofe, and her friends and family would never see her alive again. The image spread rapidly, drawing fascination and concern from people across the internet. The photo was especially chilling because of its link to her disappearance. Reports indicated that it was taken by her moments before she was picked up for a date with someone she had met on the Tinder dating app. Although the image served as a crucial lead for the investigators, the truth of what happened that night remained a mystery. Sydney Irene Loofe was born on August 21, 1993, in Broken Bow, Nebraska, raised in Arcadia. Before her family moved to Nelike in 2000, she grew up with a love for the outdoors, becoming known among her friends and family for her skill at fishing. While she played basketball and golf during her school years, a diagnosis of scoliosis as a teenager eventually forced her to step away from competitive sports. After graduating from Nelike Oakdale High School in 2011, she moved to Lincoln, where she established a routine centered around her job as a cashier at a Menards home improvement store. She lived alone in a rental home, maintaining a quiet life anchored by her commitment to her work in the care of her pet cat. In the days leading up to mid-November 2017, Sydney's life followed a predictable and grounded path. She had spent the weekend of November 11th back in her hometown of Nelike to visit her parents, George and Susie, and attend a local craft show. During this time, she was open with her family about her ongoing struggles with anxiety and major depression, a battle she had been fighting since high school. Her plans for the following week were practical. Her parents drove her back to Lincoln on Sunday evening so she could attend a scheduled doctor's appointment on Monday morning to adjust her antidepressants. It was a week she expected to spend working her regular shifts and exploring a promising new connection she had made on the dating app Tinder. Wednesday, November 15, 2017, began as a completely unremarkable day in Lincoln, Nebraska. The weather was typical for a Midwestern November, gray and cold, as Sydney prepared for her afternoon shift at the Menards home improvement store. She went about her routine with the quiet efficiency her co-workers had come to expect, finishing her shift and returning to her rental home to prepare for a second date with the woman she knew as Audrey. At approximately 6:45 p.m., a message arrived on her phone. Audrey was outside before walking out her front door. Sydney paused to take a final photo of herself in a white shirt and glasses, posting it to Snapchat with the caption, "Ready for my date." By the timeline of a normal evening, Sydney should have been home within a few hours to tend to her cat and prepare for her next shift. However, the first sign of a disruption appeared that night when her mother, Susie, sent a casual text asking about the date after seeing a Snapchat post. It went unread. The silence deepened the following morning, Thursday, November 16, when Sydney failed to show up for her scheduled shift at Menards. For a young woman known for her punctuality and structured life, this unannounced absence was the definitive break in normalcy. By the afternoon, her family casual check-ins had turned into frantic demands for a response, with Susie texting, "Sydney, we are worried sick. Please call me now." The informal search began on the morning of Friday, November 17, when Sydney's parents and sister drove from Nelike to Lincoln to check her apartment. They found her car still parked in the driveway, a sight that initially offered a flicker of hope that she was simply inside. That hope vanished upon entering the home. Sydney's purse and her only pair of prescription glasses were sitting in the apartment, items she never left without. Most telling for those who knew her was the state of her pet. The cat had been left without food or water for over 24 hours. There were no signs of a struggle or a break-in, just the eerie stillness of a life that had been interrupted in a single, mundane moment. On the evening of Thursday, November 16, the Lincoln Police Department officially opened a missing persons case for Sydney loofe. Because Sydney was an adult with no history of disappearing, investigators initially had to determine if her absence was a voluntary choice or a forced event. However, the physical evidence at her apartment, her abandoned car, her essential prescription glasses, and her neglected cat convinced detectives that this was not a runaway situation. The investigation immediately pivoted to her digital footprint, specifically the dating app Tinder, which Sydney had used to arrange her date the previous night. One of her friends, familiar with Sydney's recent dating activity, began systematically swiping through Tinder profiles in the Lincoln area. The friend eventually located a profile for a woman named Audrey, whose photos matched the person Sydney had described. This discovery provided investigators with a crucial starting point: a digital identity and a linked phone number. Through subscriber records, police identified Audrey as 23-year-old Bailey Boswell. As the digital investigation deepened, forensic analysts mapped the movement of Sydney's cell phone on the night of November 15. The data revealed that at approximately 7 p.m., Sydney's phone traveled from her home in Lincoln toward the southwest, eventually pinging off a tower in Wilbur, Nebraska, a small town about 40 miles away. The technical records showed the phone remained active in the vicinity of a specific multi-unit rental property in Wilbur until exactly 8:30 p.m., at which point the device was either turned off or the battery was removed. This precise timestamp narrowed the search grid significantly, but it also raised the stakes. Investigators now had a last known location that was an hour's drive from where the search had started. On November 19, investigators executed a search warrant at this multi-unit rental property in Wilbur. The apartment was associated with Bailey Boswell and her 51-year-old boyfriend, Aubrey Trail. When detectives entered the residence, they were met with the overwhelming scent of bleach. While no body was found, the clinical cleanliness of the apartment, specifically in the kitchen and bathroom areas, suggested a deliberate attempt to sanitize the environment. The suspects themselves were nowhere to be found, having vanished shortly after the police began making inquiries in the neighborhood. This triggered a multi-state manhunt involving the FBI and local authorities across Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri. The physical search for Sydney loofe grew to include over 20 law enforcement agencies and hundreds of volunteers. The terrain in Saline County presented a massive logistical challenge. Thousands of acres of harvested corn fields, dense timber along the Big Blue River, and hundreds of miles of unpaved county roads. Search teams utilized drones, K9 units trained in cadaver detection, and dive teams to inspect farm ponds and creek beds. Despite the intensity of the effort, the first 2 weeks of the search yielded nothing. No clothing, no personal items, and no sign of the black 2011 Ford Taurus that Boswell and Trail were known to be driving. Frustration mounted as the suspects began an unusual psychological tactic. While still fugitives, Aubrey Trail and Bailey Boswell began posting videos to a Facebook page, finding Sydney loofe and local media outlets. In these videos, filmed inside a parked car, Trail spoke directly to the camera, claiming they were being harassed by police. He admitted to being with Sydney on the night of November 15, but claimed they had dropped her off at a friend's house later that evening.
This is Aubrey Trail, and this is Bailey Boswell. I guess y'all also know her as Audrey. But we've spent the last few days watching ourselves being slammed and crucified in the newspapers and the news and everything else, so we thought it was time we had our say. The Lincoln Police Department apparently wants everyone to believe that we're hiding, that we haven't talked to them, that we're avoiding them. You've already crucified us in the newspapers. You've already crucified us on Facebook. You know, in America, I sure thought it was a trial first, but I guess not. You've heard all of this stuff about my criminal history. All true. As far as I know, I'm not wanted for anything. I'm a person of interest, and I'm not really running from anything. I pray for Sydney. I hope she's found soon. I wish the family the best. I'm sorry that she wasn't with you on Thanksgiving. And that's pretty much all I can say for now. So this has pretty much cost me my life, and I appreciate that from the Lincoln Police Department and the FBI and all those other agencies. Here's Bailey to tell you whatever she wants to.
Hi, good morning. I'm Bailey, Audrey on Tinder, and this really isn't about me. This is about Sydney. I met her on a Tuesday. We drove around Lincoln, smoked weed, had a great time. We hit it off. Picked her up the next night at her house. We drove around, smoked weed again. I went to take her home, and she asked me to drop her off at a friend's house. So, I haven't heard from her since. I guess I just want the family to know that I'm truly sorry, and I didn't have anything to do with this, and I hope that Sydney is found very soon. She is a sweet, amazing girl.
These videos served as a significant distraction, generating thousands of public tips that investigators were forced to vet, most of which proved to be dead ends. The investigation was caught in a cycle of reacting to the suspects' social media posts while the actual physical search in the Nebraska mud remained stalled. The physical search for Sydney Loofe reached its grim conclusion nearly 3 weeks after she first vanished. On December 4th and 5th, 2017, investigators followed a digital trail of breadcrumbs, specifically the self-owned location data of Aubrey Trail and Bailey Boswell, to a remote area in Clay County, Nebraska, north of the small town of Edgar. There, along a desolate gravel road roughly 60 miles from the suspect's apartment in Wilbur, search teams discovered the first of several 30-gallon black trash bags discarded in a ditch. The discovery revealed a crime of extreme and calculated brutality. Sydney's body had been systematically segmented into 14 separate parts, while most of her remains were uncovered from the bags. The forensic scene was deeply disturbing. Many of Sydney's internal organs were missing and weren't ever located. Scattered near the remains were other items that hinted at the nature of the crime, including duct tape, tarps, gloves, and a sauna suit with the crotch area cut out. 3 months later, searchers would also find Sydney's slit bra and the white shirt she had worn in her final Snapchat photo. The autopsy, conducted by forensic pathologists, provided the definitive cause of death: homicidal violence with a clear element of strangulation. Medical examiners found that Sydney's highwat bone in her neck had been crushed, and she exhibited scleral hemorrhaging and petechia, classic physical indicators of a violent, manual, or ligature-based strangulation. This evidence directly contradicted the suspect's later claims of an accidental death during a consensual encounter. The location of the remains served as the final piece of physical evidence, linking Trail and Boswell to the murder. Digital forensics confirmed that on November 16, the day after Sydney disappeared, the cell phones belonging to both suspects traveled the exact route along the county roads where the body was found. The record showed the phones were stationary or moving very slowly in that specific area for approximately 3.5 hours, providing the prosecution with a precise timeline of the disposal. As forensic teams processed the site in Clay County, the investigative focus shifted back to the two individuals who had been at the center of the timeline since the first 48 hours. 23-year-old Bailey Boswell and 51-year-old Aubrey Trail. The moment of identification had occurred early in the search, when digital forensics linked the Audrey Tinder profile to Boswell's phone number. Background checks quickly revealed that Boswell, a former high school basketball star from Iowa, was living in the Wilbur apartment with Trail, a man with a long criminal history involving fraud and theft across multiple states. However, by the time police had enough evidence to secure a search warrant for their residence, the pair had already fled Nebraska. While Sydney was still officially a missing person, investigators were forced to track the suspects through a series of bizarre and taunting social media posts from various locations in Missouri. These videos created a massive influx of false leads, as the public reported sightings of Sydney in various Missouri town sightings that investigators had to painstakingly disprove one by one while the suspects remained at large. The breakthrough in the manhunt came on November 30, 2017, when federal marshals located unarrested Traylon Boswell at a motel in Branson, Missouri. Even after their arrest, the investigation remained in a state of high frustration. During initial questioning, both suspects maintained the story that Sydney was alive and well when they last saw her. However, as detectives began digging into Trail's past and his current living situation, a much darker picture of the suspect's lifestyle began to emerge, one that suggested Sydney hadn't just gone on a date, but had walked into a meticulously constructed trap. Investigators began identifying and interviewing other women who had been in contact with the couple through dating apps. These interviews provided a window into a disturbing subculture. One woman, Ashley Hills, detailed a world of witches and vampires overseen by Trail. She described a coven where Trail was the leader and Boswell was the queen witch. Hills revealed that she had been recruited under an alias and was subjected to a rigid set of rules. She had to check in every 3 hours, remained unclothed while in their apartment, and was required to ask permission for basic needs like drinking water. If she disobeyed, Trail would physically punish her by choking or whipping her. This testimony was a pivotal turning point for the investigators. It transformed the case into a deep dive into predatory behavior. Detectives learned that Trail claimed he could gain power by killing someone and taking their last breath. This information led police to believe that Sydney had been selected specifically because of her vulnerability and her interest in the Audrey profile. The interrogation was now about deconstructing a cult-like dynamic where Boswell acted as the procurer for Trail's violent fantasies. The interrogation room became a psychological chess match, following the discovery of the remains. Trail's story shifted dramatically, no longer claiming he dropped her off. He began telling investigators that Sydney's death was a tragic accident that occurred during a consensual sexual encounter involving two other women. He claimed they were practicing erotic asphyxiation, that he had accidentally gone too far. He taunted investigators with these details, attempting to frame the death as a fantasy gone wrong rather than a premeditated murder. However, investigators were simultaneously uncovering evidence that dismantled this new alibi. Surveillance footage from a Walmart in Lincoln showed Trail and Boswell together on November 15 hours before the date, with Sydney purchasing a hacksaw, LH, and large trash bags. This discovery proved to the detectives that the tools for the crime and the disposal were acquired before Sydney ever stepped foot in their car. The accident narrative was a fabrication. The investigators now had proof of cold, calculated preparation. The reconstruction of the crime began with a single piece of surveillance footage from a Walmart in Lincoln, recorded at approximately 10:30 a.m. on November 15, 2017. while Sydney Lowe was still finishing her shift at Menards. Aubrey Trail and Bailey Boswell were captured on camera, purchasing a hacksaw, tin snips, 30-gallon trash bags, and 2 gallons of bleach. This evidence established a definitive timeline of premeditation, proving that the tools used for the dismemberment and the subsequent cleanup were acquired hours before Boswell ever arrived at Sydney's apartment. The evidence to action logic suggested that the date was never intended to be a social outing, but a terminal event planned well in advance. At 6:45 p.m., Boswell picked up Sydney in her black Ford Taurus. The digital timeline, reconstructed from Seldar pings, showed the vehicle traveling south toward the village of Wilbur at 8:32 p.m. While inside the suspect's apartment, Sydney's phone was powered down for the final time. Forensic evidence from the autopsy, specifically the fractured hyoid bone and peat Kyle hemorrhaging, led investigators to conclude that Sydney was manually strangled shortly after her arrival. The clinical lack of significant biological evidence in the rental unit, despite the extensive dismemberment that followed, was attributed to the meticulous use of the bleach in the plastic tarps purchased earlier that morning, as well as the suspect's focus on the bathroom and kitchen areas for the procedure. The motive for the crime was pieced together through the testimony of women who had previously been part of Trail's inner circle. Investigators established that Trail operated under a self-constructed narrative of gaining spiritual power through the act of killing. He had informed his followers that he needed to take a soul and take their last breath to increase his standing within his coven. Sydney, who had been open about her personal struggles with depression and anxiety, was selected as a target because the suspects believed she was vulnerable and that her disappearance might initially be dismissed by authorities as a voluntary departure. This ritualistic motive, described by investigators as a fantasy-driven predatory act, stood in stark contrast to the procedural, almost business-like efficiency with which the crime was executed. The final sequence of the reconstruction focused on the morning of November 16, while Sydney's family was beginning to realize she was missing. Trail and Boswell were recorded by cell hours, moving through the rural roads of Clay County. The data showed their phones stationary for over 3 hours in the exact locations where the 14 segments of Sydney's body were later recovered. The forensics confirmed that the dismemberment had occurred in the bathtub of the Wilbur apartment throughout the night, utilizing the hacksaw bought at Walmart. By linking the purchase of the tools, the digital pings in the Wilbur apartment, and the GPS coordinates of the disposal site, investigators successfully rebuilt the crime from its inception to its final act, dismantling the suspect's claims of a tragic accident. Legal proceedings began on June 11, 2018, when Aubrey Trail and Bailey Boswell were formally charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and improper disposal of human remains. The trials were eventually severed, with Aubrey Trail's proceedings commencing in June 2019 in Saline County. During the first week of his trial, Trail performed a public act of self-harm.
Bailey is innocent and I curse law.
Slashing his own neck with a smuggled razor blade while shouting, "Bailey is innocent and I curse you all." Upon his return to court, Trail admitted to killing Lowe but maintained the death was an accident that occurred during a sexual fantasy or consensual choking kink.
Sydney Loofe, and am fully responsible for her death. Sydney Loofe was not kidnapped by physical or electronic means. Bailey Boswell had nothing to do with the death of Sydney Loofe. She was in the house it happened in, but was not in the room.
The jury rejected this narrative after less than 3 hours of deliberation, convicting him on all counts. In June 2021, a 3-judge panel sentenced Trail to death, concluding that the murder manifested exceptional depravity and was a coldly planned act to satisfy sexual urges. Bailey Boswell's trial followed in September 2020, with the venue moved to Lexington, Nebraska, to mitigate the impact of pretrial publicity. The prosecution's evidence against her was anchored by surveillance footage of the premeditated purchase of dismemberment tools and cell tower data that tracked her movements to the disposal site in Clay County. Susie loofe, Sydney's mother, was the first witness called to the stand. She detailed her daughter's final days and her ongoing struggle with depression, which the suspects had allegedly planned to exploit. The defense argued that Boswell was a victim of Trail's manipulation and had been coerced into participating in the crime. In October 2020, the jury convicted Boswell on all charges, although she was the first woman in Nebraska history to face the death penalty. The three-judge sentencing panel was not unanimous in its decision, resulting in a sentence of life in prison without parole rather than execution. Aubrey Trail is currently housed on death row at the Tecumseh State Correctional Institution, while Bailey Boswell is serving her life sentence at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women in York. Sydney's name was tethered to educational and preventative efforts through the Set Me Free Project, an anti-trafficking nonprofit organization that established a $3,000 scholarship in her honor. The scholarship is specifically designated for students pursuing careers in criminology, online safety, and social work, aiming to equip a new generation with the tools to prevent digital predation. The case also sparked a national conversation regarding the inherent risks of digital dating and the Tinder trap. Media coverage and safety experts used the tragedy as a catalyst to examine how easily predatory individuals can use online profiles to research and target victims, noting that while dating apps are marketed as social tools, they can also promote dangerous fantasies for those with violent intentions. This public discourse led to calls for better tracking of physical assaults linked to dating sites, an area where federal and local data has historically been scant. For Sydney's family, the most enduring image of her spirit remains a tattoo she had on her upper arm, which was discussed during her mother's emotional testimony. The ink read, "Everything will be wonderful someday," a phrase that has since become a poignant symbol for those who continue to advocate for justice and safety in her name. If you found this case fascinating, or you learned something new, then please remember to like the video and subscribe to Cold Cases True Crime Documentaries. We post crime videos every night. And also, if you guys have any other cases you'd like to recommend, please leave them in the comments below because all stories deserve to be heard. And as always, I'll be back again really soon for another video. But until next time, always remember, stay sharp, stay vigilant.